All right. So it's 11:22, so we're just gonna get started. Just to make sure everybody is where they should be. This is track 6, T6 for TCF, and this is Interactive Simulations for Climate Solutions by Juliette Rooney-Varga. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks. So we have a really, it's first of all, thank you for being here on a Saturday morning. I know that usually on Saturday morning, I'm not doing this, so I'm grateful for the chance to talk to you and spend some time with you today. Also, given that we're a small group here today, I think it's a great opportunity to unmute and have a conversation. So please consider this an invitation to turn your webcam on if you have one. It's going to be a heck of a lot easier to have a conversation. I'd like this to be as interactive and interesting as possible. Since we all are here on a Saturday morning, we might as well make it good. And if I could also ask you to please feel free to unmute, to chime in. I would much rather be having a conversation with you than talking at you the whole time. So I'll just put that out there too. And if I could ask you, I'm going to be showing you today the reason that I want this to be as interactive as possible. So again, one more time, invitation to put your webcam on if you can. Thank you, appreciate that, is to basically, we're going to create together in this session. This is not going to be me talking at you. This is going to be us working together on a simulator to try to create a path to a sustainable climate. And so I need your decisions here. So I'm gonna, before we get started, if you don't mind, if you could fill in this really quick survey. It's 3 questions. It asks you, and I can give you let me just do a screen share so that you can see the QR code too, if that's easier. You'd be doing us a favor by doing these 3 super quick survey. Basically what it is we're working with the MIT Sustainability Initiative and an organization called Climate Interactive to bring the simulator that I'm going to share with you today to decision makers around the world. And we're trying to get a better understanding of sort of what works and what doesn't. And so if you could just take a moment, that would be awesome. And I'll give you until about 11:25 to wrap that up. Okay. Everybody get a chance to take a look at that? Can I get a thumbs up or just a note in the chat? Okay, I'm gonna go with yes. So great. So today what I want to share with you is this interactive simulation approach to learning and action for climate solutions. I'm coming to you from the University of Massachusetts at Lowell, where I am a professor and I direct the Climate Change Initiative and the RIST Institute for Sustainability and Energy. Happy to share with you anything about that if you're interested. So again, this work that I'm sharing with you today is part of what we call the Climate Pathways Project, and it is a collaboration between our group at the Climate Change Initiative at UMass Lowell, Climate Interactive, and the MIT Sustainability Initiative. Okay, I'm sort of feeling like the news has been pretty heavy lately. I don't know about you. Seem like that to you too? And I don't need or want to spend a whole lot of time doing the Dr. Doom story, because I'm guessing you're probably fairly familiar with it already, or at least have some inkling about it. But I'm just going to put this out there briefly that very recently we had this IPCC report, or basically a UN climate science report that came out, and as has been the case in the past, so this one is a little bit more ramped up. This was sort of, the climate code red, as it's been called. Scientists really trying to get our attention at this point to say that we're headed in the wrong direction. And if we don't take aggressive action soon, if we don't take strong action on climate change soon, or now really, we're going to end up with potentially catastrophic consequences. And so We don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I'm guessing you don't want to do that either. And I think the question is, how do we get from that sort of awful potential future to a future that we actually want? And that's what we're going to do today. So our approach, again, is this interactive simulation-based approach. As one of my close colleagues likes to say, research shows that showing people research doesn't work. That's my colleague, John Sturman. And scientists have been showing people research for a very long time, and look at where that's gotten us. So what can we do instead? Research also shows that telling people what to think, feel, or do doesn't work, and that can actually backfire. So we don't want to tell people what they should be doing, thinking, or feeling. And the other thing that I think is really important to understand is that each one of us is the world's expert on the actions that we can take. And so it doesn't make sense to tell people what to think, feel, or do, because I don't know what you can do on climate change. You know what you can do. And that's why that's not our goal, right? Our goal is instead to give people the tools that they need to make their own decisions about this topic. So we provide simulations that enable people to learn, and our research shows that they also feel for themselves, like this generates intrinsic sense of urgency and intent to take action. And our goal, again, is like not to tell you about the science, but to put the best available science into decision makers' hands at all levels of society. So this would be not just an education in terms of formal education with students, but education for decision makers at all levels, from the highest levels of government to, again, to citizens everywhere. Okay, people familiar with the Paris Agreement? Can I get a, all right. Okay, so Paris Agreement 2015, it was a great meeting. Basically, the world came together and the countries, heads of state from around the world agreed that our collective goal, our international goal, is to limit warming to 1.5 to 2 degrees C above pre-industrial times. So today, that's your goal. That's the goal that I'm going to ask you to meet. I need your help. In order to do this, we're going to use the En-ROADS Climate Solutions Simulator. So I'm going to show you that in a moment. Before we go there, I'm just going to tell you briefly that this is a tool that we are using in education, but it's not just being used in education, it's being used again by policymakers around the world. So far we've engaged over 180 US senators and members of the House of Representatives. From both sides of the aisle, we've engaged over 700 business leaders across multiple industries, more than 200 staffers for elected officials, again, across both sides of the aisle, leaders in nonprofits, think tanks in the foundation sector, and now over 70,000 participants worldwide in 85 countries. And some of our kind of, happy users include John Kerry, US Secretary of State and Climate Envoy now, and some CEOs of large companies. So here we have former CEO of SAP Denmark, talking about their experiences using En-ROADS. Okay, I've already talked enough. What I would like to do is ask you if you could just write in the chat, is there a climate action that you, if you were a benevolent dictator of the world, you would really like to see the world take? Or just a climate action, if you don't have that at the top of your mind, a climate action that you've heard about, you've heard people talking about, or maybe that you've taken recently. Just stop using fossil fuels. All right, that's a great one, Veronica. And feel free to unmute if that's easier. Happy to hear your voice. Joan says clean renewable energy. So I guess that would be investing in clean renewable energy. Okay, keep rainforests from becoming cow ranches. That's great, love that. Anything else? Take it out of politics. Boy, that's great. That's not a policy, but that would be, so I'm not sure what that would look like as a climate action, but definitely agree with that being important. Limit population to 1 child per family. Oh yeah, so influences on population. Okay, anything else? Any other, so that's a bunch we can get started with. Anything else? All right, let's dig in. Okay, so we're going to take a look at how these actions might play out in the global energy system and our climate. Okay, so what I'm showing you right now is the En-ROADS model. It stands for Energy Rapid Overview and Decision Support. You can see over here, we've got global sources of primary energy. So going out from 2000 to 2100. And of course, this is the past. So all the decisions that you make today are going to affect the future, but not the past. Going out from 2022 to 2100. We have in brown coal, in oil, in red oil. So that would be, you know, clearly like the gas we put in our cars. In dark blue, we have natural gas. In green, we have renewables. So this would be solar, wind, hydroelectric, and geothermal power. In pink, we have bioenergy. And then the cyan color over here, we have nuclear energy growing over time. We also have a potential, it's not shown in our energy supply because we haven't invested in it sufficiently yet, but this would be an example of some kind of new zero carbon energy supply coming out of labs and being plugged into the grid. So you could think of maybe cold fusion or artificial photosynthesis or something like that. Over here, we have greenhouse gas emissions that result from primarily from this energy supply, but also from land use change and from nitrous oxide and methane emissions, so some non-CO2 emissions. And then over here, we have the resulting temperature outcome. So right now, if you don't take any action, then we will see, we expect to see on the order of a 3.6 degrees C rise by 2100. Just want to ask, can people see this little blip over here? Anybody have an idea what that is?
Was it COVID?
That's COVID. That's exactly right. So we got our lockdowns right there and the effect on the economy. Good news or bad news, depending on your perspective, is we've picked right back up and emissions are rising again. So that is one blip that is actually significant. Another blip you might be able to pick up right around 2008, 2009. That's a recession. So that's the impact of that, of those economic changes. And that kind of brings up here too, that if I can show you briefly, you can see here that the model assumes a global population that grows kind of middle of the road growth over time, GDP per capita growing over time as well. We can see again that COVID blip and the recession from 2008. And if you have global population, amount of money spent per person, energy intensity of GDP, so the amount of energy used per unit money spent, times the amount of emissions per unit energy used, we end up with emissions rising over time. And you can see in our model, we're assuming that the economy continues to become more energy efficient and that the energy supply continues to decarbonize, but it doesn't do so quickly enough to stop this catastrophic level of warming. Okay, so we're going to take a look at some of the things that you all wanted to do. And we've got a question from David, if I may ask, are these simulations based on research presented in Juliana versus UIS? I'm not sure what your, David, if you want to unmute and maybe talk about that case, I'm not familiar with that. I'm not sure what the underlying, the model is basically relying on many sources of data. I can tell you more about that. We rely on many data sets, including the IEA, the International Energy Agency, and others for the, in fact, I can also show you how the model compares in terms of things like hindcasting energy demand for different sources of energy like wind and solar. And it also has a carbon cycle and climate sector where we are calibrating the model to much larger models, but also have biogeochemical cycles for carbon, and for other greenhouse gases like nitrous oxide and F gases, as well as a climate sector. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, David, but feel free to go on and ask more if you still have questions about that. Okay, so we have some ideas about what to do in terms of taking action. Rich asks if nuclear can ever work. So shall we give that a go and try nuclear? So what I'm going to show you here before I dive in is the levers that are at our disposal in the model. So here we have the opportunity to take action on any form of energy supply. So Veronica wanted to stop using fossil fuels. We're going to try that too, although we can't just turn a switch off. So we're going to dive into that in a little more detail, Veronica. But we can discourage or encourage coal, oil, natural gas, bioenergy, renewables, nuclear. We can invest in new zero carbon sources of energy, and we can implement a price on carbon. We can also include emissions performance standards or get more sophisticated in terms of like accelerated retirement of coal plants and that kind of thing. We'll dive into that in more detail in just a moment. We can also increase the efficiency of transport. So more efficient cars, more public transit, more active transit like walking and biking. We can electrify transport, so more EVs. We can also increase the energy efficiency of our buildings and industry sectors. So for example, insulating our homes, energy efficient appliances, and more efficient industrial processes and manufacturing. And we can also electrify all of those things.
Can you hear me okay?
Sorry?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
So when you adjust these, is that changing the target by 2100 with a gradual trend?
Yeah. So let's start off with the example of nuclear. I think that was one that somebody wanted to take a look at. Can dive in a little more detail, and we could tax or subsidize nuclear energy. So let's say that we decide to subsidize nuclear energy right there. Okay, so I can decide when I want to start that subsidy, when I want to stop it, or if I want to invest in some kind of breakthrough cost reduction. So for example, here, let's just go with that subsidy. I'm going to go with a pretty high subsidy. Shall we try that? Okay, and let's see what happens. Okay, so you can see nuclear energy with that subsidy becomes more attractive. The model has a market clearing approach so that it favors the cheapest sources of energy. It ensures that the lights are not going to get turned off. So demand is always met by supply. And you can see too that there is a decline in emissions that results from that increase. Is it what you expected? Going to play that one more time. Decrease in temperature? What do you think? Yeah, so a little bit. It's not picked up in the Celsius scale, but there is a little bit of an impact that's getting picked up on the Fahrenheit scale from 6.5 to 6.4. Maybe not quite the impact you thought it would have. Why is that? Why do we see not such a huge impact as one might hope? What happens when nuclear goes up? So does it go up a lot, first of all? It goes up a lot relative to the amount of nuclear that we currently have. Looking at the amount of nuclear over here, that's the primary energy demand compared to our base case scenario. But nuclear is expensive and it takes time to build. So it takes time to permit plants and to actually build them. We're talking about physical infrastructure. So while it does increase relative to the base case scenario, it takes time for that new nuclear to come on board. And what's it squeezing out? Do you see that change? Which form of energy here which forms of energy are going down a little bit in response to nuclear going up? One is renewables, right? So one thing that's happening is that nuclear is crowding out some of those renewables. So if that's the case, it's not going to really help us much. Does that answer your question, Bob? In terms of how the model works, like at least for that one particular lever, we're going to dive in and look at some other levers. Yeah,
I think it does. Thanks. And I was curious about nuclear in particular. Does that account for, I forget what they're called, but like smaller scale installations and like innovation that may come out of that industry? Does the model assume that we get better and better?
Okay, so the model does assume that we learn by doing and we get economies of scale and basically what's referred to as a progress ratio, whereas you make progress, you cost does come down. But I think what you're talking about is something different, which would be new forms like thorium fission or other forms of nuclear energy that are not really part of conventional like current nuclear energy. So that would be under this new carbon new zero carbon energy source. So I think that's a great idea to actually implement that lever as well. So and I also just want to mention that with such a small group, I think we have an opportunity to, like my goal here too, is to give you this tool and for you to go ahead and dive in and use it hopefully in the future. So let's take a look at this. So what if we have a new zero carbon, like some new form of nuclear energy, like thorium-based nuclear fission, for example, or nuclear fusion that comes out of labs and gets plugged into the grid. So question for you, Bob, when do you want that to come out of the labs? Like when is this breakthrough going to happen?
Oh man, I don't know.
Yeah, here's your chance, benevolent dictator of the world. What's your forecast? Maybe
10 years.
10 years. All right. So 2032 we're looking at, is that right?
Mm-hmm. If we can get people panicked enough.
Okay. If we can, or, we've got Jeff Bezos interested in the idea. So I'm going to go ahead and implement that and play that again. What do you see? What's happening? Impact?
A whole lot of nothing.
I don't know about that. There's something going on there. All right. So first of all, what's the whole lot of nothing? Where do you see that? Not the temperature effect you were hoping for?
No.
Okay. So not the temperature effect you were hoping for, but we do see.
Is this global or US only?
This is global. It's a global model. Okay, so this is the entire world taking advantage of this form of energy. That's great, Veronica. Thanks. So with the new zero carbon form of energy, what's going on? So let's play that one more time. What do you see happening? Okay, it's coming on. We've got a new form of energy. It is, again, something that's going to take time to build. So we're talking about physical infrastructure that's not going to replace existing infrastructure overnight. It's going to replace existing infrastructure as we see older infrastructure getting retired and the opportunity to build, slowly build over time. And it also takes time to commercialize, right? So we assume new zero carbon time to commercialize of about 10 years, which is ballpark what we would expect. And the real difference that's being made here, well, also what's getting squeezed out? What do you see? Seeing some renewables getting squeezed out again, so that's not going to make a huge difference. And this new form of energy is really coming online and making the most difference in the later part of the century when the carbon has already accumulated in the atmosphere. So it's coming on a little bit too late. Okay, what else do we have? I envision nuclear to generate electricity to power homes, factories, cars, and trains. Make hydrogen for planes. Love it. All right. But so I guess, Rich, is part of what you're saying that we need to electrify transport and industry? Is that what I'm hearing? Because you've got nuclear already and it didn't get us where we wanted to go. Help me out, Rich. Should we push this lever? Okay, great. So that's another thing we can do is we can electrify transport and buildings and industries. So should we push that lever really hard? Okay, let's push it really hard. I'm gonna go for this one. So what do people think? Is this gonna be huge impact? Okay, substantial impact. All right, let's go for it. Okay, so there is definitely some impact. We're squeezing out oil, which is a good thing. We do now have both a zero carbon, we've subsidized nuclear, we have a zero carbon source of cheap energy in the later part of the century, at least, so that's good. Some impact, but still 3.3, we're nowhere near where we need to be. And I'm going to go ahead and electrify buildings and industry. Okay, so again, that helps. So now if we look at that lever, we've got natural gas and oil coming down significantly. But 3 is still not where we want to go. What else can we do? I know we had some people talking about, Joan was suggesting clean renewable energy. Shall we go ahead and push on that lever? All right, let's try that. So we're going to push on clean renewable energy. We're going to subsidize wind, solar, hydro. And maybe I should pull that one a little bit harder. I'm going to go, okay, so we'll go as far as we can on that. Now, part of what's happening here, do you see that we have primary energy demand, or so primary, our total global sources of primary energy actually goes up a little bit, because what we've done so far is we've added a lot of cheap energy to the system. So far we've subsidized renewables, we've subsidized nuclear, and we've invested in new zero carbon technology. And so we've made an impact. We've got a lot more renewable energy and zero carbon energy in the system, but we also have really high energy demand, and we haven't pushed down on that yet. Okay, let's see what we've got. Are you able to discuss variables within this climate modeling simulation that this simulation feels may contribute to future temperature reduction? Rich Henry, eventually carbon runs out, becomes too expensive, maybe too. Okay, so yes, I guess I'm asking you to help identify the variables that are going to make a difference. And to Rich's point, eventually carbon does run out, but sadly, we have more than enough hydrocarbons to fry the planet. So we need to have a downward pressure on them before they run out, like well before they run out. So that's something that we can't count on to solve the problem. Okay. Veronica, should we call on you to push some levers for us?
Oh, I was going to ask, for this simulation that you have currently running, is that part of the leapfrogging that they talk about in some areas of the planet, where we can just jump right over dirty power and right straight into clean power?
That's a great question. So, I mean, I think that basically the answer is yes. But whether we do that or not is really going to depend on what? On like the policies that are in place in different parts of the world, on the prices of different forms of energy, on the level of technology transfer that's happening, and global coordination. I mean, I think one of the things, frankly, that scares me right now with the war that's ongoing is, are we going, I mean, there are many things that scare me about the war that's going on, but in terms of the climate perspective is, are we going to be able to, at what level will we have global coordination, right? That's going to influence whether we're able to do that. I think that in this scenario that we're looking at right now, which I think what you're asking about, essentially, yes, right? Because here, where a lot of this new infrastructure is going to be built at a global level is in developing countries. Because we're not going to just retire, we're not going to retire existing functioning infrastructure until its useful life runs out. Okay, so let's keep on going. So what about your suggestions, Veronica, about turning the switch off on fossil fuels. We can't really do that, but we could take some actions like reducing the amount of coal that we use or stop building new coal infrastructure. Do you want to give that a go? Okay, and when are we going to do that?
I say 20 years. We got to give people time.
Okay, so let's go ahead and 20 years, and that's going to go to 2042. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that lever one more time so you can see that. And impact. It's helping, right? We're seeing coal come down a lot. It's not right away. So we've got this problem that between 2022 and 2060 or so, we're still using it. What else? We had population, rainforests. You still have, are there any other policies that you would like to see to stop using fossil fuels or to cut down on fossil fuels?
I'd like to try the building energy efficiency.
Okay, this is a great one, right? This is going to be insulating our homes, cutting down on our costs for energy aggressively. Are we pushing this ambitiously or? Okay, all right, let's push it hard. Impact that you thought we'd have?
The energy use went so far down. We're using so much energy just to heat our buildings and cool our buildings.
Buildings and industry, right? This is heating, cooling, all the appliances that we use in our buildings, and it's also manufacturing and production, right? So yes, so increasing the efficiency of those processes is high leverage, makes a big difference. Okay, we're at 2.7 degrees. How far are we from our goal? We're not there yet. We have a little bit more time. We got to keep on going. What else do you want to do here? We have, somebody had mentioned rainforests. Bob, I think that was you.
It was, yeah.
Should we protect our forests?
I mean, you're concerning me. You're saying that, like, even if we got consumption way down, it's still not going to cut it. I wasn't expecting that.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think, well,
I guess we never did the carbon pricing yet, and that's where you were headed.
I'm open to carbon pricing. You want to give that a go?
Yeah, you were saying that, like, and it makes sense that, you know, cheap and available is just going to increase use. There's no downward pressure. So sure.
Okay. What do you want to do for a price on carbon?
You live and breathe this. What do you suggest? Does this account for, like, if you scrolled that so far up, would it say that there would be, like, mass unrest, or like,
yeah,
what's the balance?
Yeah, I mean, see, the reality is that it doesn't matter if I live and breathe this, because as Frank was saying in the last talk, we have a social problem on our hands, and unless we have policies that people support, they're not going to be enacted, right? Or at least some people support. So I think I can tell you one of the things that I've seen on the table here where I sit in Massachusetts would be, and I think makes sense in terms of a politically palatable solution potentially, would be to start with something on the order of, I don't know what, you tell me, like 30, 50, 40, 100, you know, what sounds reasonable to you, dollars per ton, but then ramp it up slowly over time so that you continue to have that kind of like slow but steady increase in your price in carbon. Like, so here in Massachusetts, there was a proposal to do $40 a ton and then add $5 a ton every year.
Honestly, I don't even know what a ton of CO2 even represents?
So if you have $100 a ton price on carbon, that would translate to about $1 that, I think I'm right about that, about $1 at the pump.
Okay.
So $40 a ton would translate to 40 cents or so, which
Okay.
right now might feel a little bit tricky, but you want to give it a go? Okay,
Sure.
so the other side of this, of course, is that carbon price generates carbon revenue, and that could go back to people. So if we go ahead and we phase in a $40 a ton, so I'm just going to do that. That's one policy. That's a pretty that's not a very aggressive price on carbon. I'm going to go ahead and ramp that up so that it continues to rise over time. And let's see what that. So now I'm going to play that one more time. Okay. And I also will just give you a quick look at this, that if I were to implement that price on carbon alone, here we are at the baseline of 3.6. Look at what happens. That's just that one policy. But you've already done so much that we're not seeing that huge of an effect with that policy in this scenario, because you've already introduced a lot of energy efficiency and you've already subsidized renewables and other forms of zero carbon energy. So it's helping for sure. It's just maybe, you know, it's not a huge impact in and of itself, because now we're getting into this paradox of like having to push harder once we've done a lot of different things.
That's very interesting.
Okay, we're at 2.4. We have like 5 minutes left. What should we do? You have 5 minutes to save the world. Help me.
Let's save those rainforests. Stop deforestation.
Okay. Okay, we're going to save the rainforests. All right, so if I push really hard on this, what we're doing is protecting existing forests. Ready? Keep an eye on the temperature. Okay, so there, I'm going to tell you honestly that this is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine in the model. It is critical to protect our forests. It's absolutely critical. The problem is that if we don't get emissions down, so the reason it's critical to protect our forests is for biodiversity, and because if we don't protect our forests, we could end up with those forests becoming carbon sources as opposed to sinks. Like, for example, microclimates change in the Amazon in response to clear cuts, in response to removal of vegetation, and that could actually lead to reinforcing feedback loops where we end up with less and less rainforest because it's not supported by the microclimate anymore. So that's not in the model. But deforestation is not going to save the day. So the problem is that protecting our forests, if we're emitting, like it can't account, it's not going to be able to absorb the carbon that we are emitting. Okay, helps, but maybe not enough. What else can we do if all energy usage stopped? So Rich, yeah, we would see the temperature increase would certainly would stop, right? We would see the temperature rise, we would see temperature stabilize and actually potentially come down a little bit over time if all energy usage stopped. But I also want to just keep in mind that we, you know, if we're using zero carbon forms of energy, that's also not going to have an influence on temperature. And of course, if all energy usage stopped, I mean, what the impact that would have on society would be devastating. So I don't know that that's an experiment that we really want to do. Most power plants use carbon-based sources such as natural gas, coal. If all changed to clean renewable, wouldn't it bring down temp? Yeah, and the CO2 is already there. That's right. So yeah. So Joan, the thing is that the problem that we have is that there is like unlike, you know, my latest iPhone app, right, where you can very rapidly replace and spread the use of a new app or replace an old app with a new app. Here, what we're talking about is physical infrastructure, cars, trucks, power plants, buildings, and all of that takes time to change. And I don't know about you, but I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna get rid of my old car if it's still working, and replace it with an EV, you know, an efficient EV or a bicycle. Really, maybe what we should be doing, if it's, you know, if before its useful life is over. And so again, in the Model 2, unless you have accelerated retirement or as or it becomes too expensive to operate plants, we have existing plants staying online until their useful life is over, and new plants take time to build. We have an existing stock of buildings. Okay, it's 12:03. What else can we do? So you're absolutely right that we want to put a downward pressure on natural gas, coal, oil, but there's no magic switch. Can somebody give me something else to do to get us below 2 degrees C? We have not, so I think we've not yet talked about population. I'm sort of reluctant to go there, but I can if you really want. And we've also not talked about methane or other gases. This would include things like better management of agriculture, fertilizers like that result in the release of nitrous oxide, less of a switch from plant-based diets to meat and dairy-based diets that we're seeing right now, and also controlling energy and industry emissions of methane, nitrous oxide, and F gases. These are powerful greenhouse gases that are not CO2. So would you like to try that lever or any other levers that you see? What else can we do? Does the model take into account positive feedback of temperature rise, Rich? So yeah, I am happy to dive into that too. So it does take some of that into account, but not much. And in fact, if you want to go into that in more detail, what you can do is basically we're taking kind of consensus science understanding of climate change feedbacks into account. But if you what you can do is you can change some of the assumptions that are underlying the model in terms of, for example, climate system sensitivities. So here, how much of an impact does CO2 fertilization or changes in ocean mixing have, or methane emissions from the Arctic, for example? All of those can be included in the model if that's what you're asking. How often are these models updated? The individual takes more informed feedback to our legislators. Yeah, the model's updated constantly, essentially. So it's pretty much undergoing constant updating. Boy, we've just got a few more minutes left. I'd really like to get down to below 2 degrees. Is that okay with people? I mean, it is, you know, it's like, I'd like to leave here feeling, can you give me one more thing to do?
The carbon capture.
Okay.
Get out what's already in the air.
Okay, so we're gonna vacuum up the things. And so I'm willing to push this a little bit. I guess I feel like currently, something like direct air capture costs about $800 to $1,000 a ton. So back to Bob's comment about how much of a price on carbon should we put. If we put $800 to $1,000 per ton, that's like far out of the scope of what anybody's talking about right now. But maybe the price will come down. So let's just push us a little bit. And there you see it again. So now we are removing gigatons. It takes a little bit, it takes some time to scale that up. And we have on our hands billions and billions of tons of carbonate to deal with. So that's another potential issue. Where are we going to put all that stuff and how are we going to move it around? In this scenario too, we're now talking about using some land to do this. So where are we going to find that land in the order of, 100 million hectares a year? But that is something that we can do. We're at 2.2 degrees. What else can we do? Somebody wanted to look at population. Should we push that lever? A little bit, okay. No.
So
Go ahead, Bob.
that the methane one, isn't that if we were able to grow meats in a lab or have less cows being grazed?
Yeah.
That's what that is, right?
Yeah, that's more plant-based diets, better management of organic waste, better management of fertilizers, less leakage of methane. I don't know if it made it into the news in your area, but here in Massachusetts, there were a bunch of houses that blew up because of methane leaks in the Merrimack Valley. So stopping to do that. So shall we pull on that lever and see how that responds? Okay,
Well,
here we go.
If it's not this, what else could it be?
Okay. Okay, so there we go. And that is getting us to below 1 point, to getting us to below 2. And so I'd like to take a moment to say thank you. We got there.
Can you scale coal back a little bit?
Yeah, I can scale coal back a little bit more than we already are, you're asking?
Oh, it's still at status quo.
No, it is, we stopped building coal infrastructure in 2042. We can stop building it sooner. Shall we do that?
Sure.
All right.
Okay, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think here what we've got, we do have that downward pressure on with the price on carbon, which is really helping things a lot. We haven't implemented energy efficiency in transport, so I could pull that one as well. And I think that would help us a little bit. Let's try that. Yeah, but it gets a lot harder to move things down at this point. I guess I want to just take a step back and ask you, is there anything else that you would like to do, or just really, what are some take-home messages here? So again, these levers are designed to allow what we currently think are sort of the range of possible actions. So pulling on a lever to the maximum level is kind of our current understanding of what a highly ambitious level of action would be. Of course, a caveat there is that you could say we haven't really tried to push for climate action on like a war footing that Frank would certainly argue for, and I think many young people that I know would argue for, I would argue for. So is it possible to push on those levers harder? I think it probably is. Are we seeing that now? Not right now, right? So what are some take-home messages? Well, based on our current understanding, is it possible to achieve our international climate goals? What do you think?
If we're counting 2 and not necessarily the 1.5.
1.5 is tough.
Yeah.
We'd have to pull really hard on just about everything. If we're counting 2, yeah. So it's technically and scientifically, economically possible. We did not kill the economy here. In fact, I'd argue that climate change would do a lot worse to kill the economy. Is it politically possible, right? That's up to us. I think that's another question. What are some other take-home messages? When do we need to take action?
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Is there a place to see what experts would set these to, and what the current thinking is, and see if I disagree with them?
That's a great question. I don't think so, and other people have asked us, like, you know, can't you optimize across the model? And I think that's kind of the same question, right? Like, what would be the optimal solution? The problem is that there's no, it's really, the question is, what are you optimizing for, right? So like, are you optimizing for energy cost? Are you optimizing for temperature outcomes? Are you, you know, what are you an expert in? Do you, you know, there are many different possible solutions. And I think the, you know, another kind of take home is like, there is no one path to get there. There are many paths that we could take. There are many different policies we could implement. And really, I think it would depend on what kind of an expert you're asking, what they would push for. I think one of the problems that we're seeing is that some of the experts that we're seeing people push for solutions. You know, is there one solution that's going to get us there? You know, no, right? There's not one, there's no silver bullet. There's no one solution that's going to get us there. And I think we are seeing people in some cases like push for a particular, like their favorite solution and make it seem like that solution is enough to get us there. And I think that's a problem. Mm-hmm. Any other questions or comments?
We have 2 minutes left, so maybe one more question or two.
Yeah. Yeah, and Craig is pointing out that the model doesn't differentiate between actions corporations or government can take versus individual action. Yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't differentiate between that, but it does give you the opportunity to look at both. I mean, you could think about something like a cultural shift or individuals taking action to increase energy efficiency, and that gets folded into that energy efficiency lever. And it is really interesting to see students, for example, many of my students, you know, really focused on taking personal action to reduce their energy use. Okay, well, if we, with a couple minutes that we have left, if you would be so kind as to fill in our post survey, we would certainly appreciate that. And I'm also happy to provide any, you know, to share resources with you. We have resources that allow, you know, that enable you to do a game, a role-playing game with students based on this model where students take on the roles of leaders of different sectors. And we find that to be a really engaging and fun activity for them where they learn a lot. And I'll drop that in the chat as well.
Sounds good. That's basically all the time we have. So
great, thanks a lot.